Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Huckleberry Finn was a brave, clever, and wild boy. He went through a series of adventures, sometimes saving innocent people from being dubbed by weak thugs, sometimes risking his own life in order to free people from the clutches of slavery. Whenever Huck went, whatever he did, he inevitably bumped with his closest friend Tom Sawyer, and together they formed the two most popular fiction characters for all time. Huckleberry Finn was a smart young boy who lived in St. Petersburg, Missouri, on the banks of the river Mississippi. He and his friend Tom Sawyer had found a lot of money from one of their previous adventures. Huck had put the money in a bank. However, he still remained a careful boy with nobody to look after him. Widow Douglas, a kind old woman who lived with her strict sister, Miss Weston, took pity on him. She adopted Huck and took upon herself to turn him into a fine young gentleman. She would send Huck to school and church and try to teach him manners and cleanliness. But he did not like that all. "Oh, I am sick and tired of trying to be a good boy. I want to run away," he told to Tom Sawyer one day. "Not now. I am planning to form a gang of robbers. If you want to join, then stay back for a while." At night, when everybody was asleep, Huckleberry heard a loud mew near the bushes and stepped out to find Tom Sawyer waiting for him. "Tom, what are you doing here?" explained Huck. Tom patted him on the back and said, "Follow me, my son. I am taking you out on an adventure." Just when the two were about to step out of the garden, Huckleberry caught his foot on the root of a tree and fell down. Jim, Miss Weston's slave, almost caught them, but they escaped on their hands and knees. Tom took Huckleberry and two other boys, Joe Harper and Ben Roger, on a skiff to a nearby island. There he took them inside a damp cave and declared, "It is here today that we form our gang of robbers. However, we will have to take an oath. Our secret should live and die with us." They all signed an oath, which, among other things, said that if any of them spilled the secret of the gang, then their family would be killed. But then Joe said, "How can Huck join the gang? He does not have a family." Huck's father had gone missing a year ago, and he had no other family. But Huck had a brilliant idea. He said, "I offer Miss Weston for the killing if I ever break the oath." In about a month, this gang of highwaymen, realizing that robbery was not at all easy. All the boys expected a lot of excitement, but since nothing happened, no loots, no fights, slowly the boys resigned from the gang. Huck also started getting used of life at school. One day when he returned home, he found his father sitting in his room, dressed in rags. Huck was shocked. He had given up his father for dead. However, he was not at all happy to see that man back in his life. He was really afraid of Pop. As he called his father, "Pop would get drunk now and again and beat me up." Pop said, "Look at you, looking all like a gentleman and wearing such well-tailored clothes, while I am dressed in rags and have nothing to eat." Huck shivered as he heard the cruel voice. His father continued, "I want your all money, and you too, you lazy boy." Soon Window Douglas entered the ken and shouted at Pop, "You good for nothing! I will never give Huckleberry over to you, and the money belongs to him. He shall use it when he is old enough." Pop got angry. He couldn't say much there but kidnapped Huck and hid him in an old wood cabin. Whenever Pop left the cabin house, he would lock Huck in. He would also beat up the boy when he was drunk. He was sick of it. Huck was sick of it all. So soon one day he got some pig's blood and sprinkled over the floor to make it seem like he had been killed. Then he cut through the wood of the cabin with an old saw and ran away. Seeing blood on the floor and no signs of Huck, everybody thought that Huck was dead. Pop judged everybody that Datcher, Miss Weston, and Tom Sawyer grew very sad. They set off on a boat to look of his body, but there was nothing to be found. Huck took shelter in Jackson Island. One day, while out looking for fruits to eat, Huck stumbled upon someone, in the dark. It was none other than Jim, the slave, who had escaped and was living alone on the island. "Why, Jim, what are you doing here?" asked Huck. He would walked out from behind the bushes. Jim screamed, "Stand back! Stand back, you ghost! For I have not harmed you." For a while, Huck just rolled about in later and then said, "It's okay, Jim. It's me. And I am alive. I just had to run away from Pop." Jim sighed in relief, but then frowned and said, "Promise you won't tell on me, Huck?"
Jim told him that he would find out that he would be sold. He did not want to be sold. So he ran away and decided to go to the south of the country where people could not keep slaves. Huck had been feeling lonely all by himself. Jim was fun to talk to and could cook really well. He was helpful too, so Huck decided to be with him. One day, as they were enjoying a meal, Jim spotted a few birds behaving strangely. They would fly up, then suddenly they would stop, turn back, and fly down. Restlessly, they went on repeating the same stunt again and again. Jim observed with a serious face. "Looks like it's going to rain hard tonight." "Huh?" said Jim. Huck did not believe him, but they decided to look around and find a place to keep them safe if it rained. They found a cave in the middle of the island and moved all their food supplies there, and they hid Huck's boat in the bushes nearby. It indeed began raining at night and continued for some days. The water level rose in the river and there was flood. One such day, Jim saw a long raft float by. Huck ran along the bank and managed to catch and pull the raft on the island with Jim's help. Soon after, they saw a frame house float by. Huck was all excited and said, "Let's get inside the house, Jim. We might find something we can use." As they were going through the house, Huck saw a man lying on his stomach on the floor. He poked the man, but the man did not stir. Then Jim came along and checked the man and said, "He won't move, Huck. He is dead. And don't you go looking at his place." They didn't spend any more time in the house and jumped back onto the island. Life was never safe on the island. One day, a snake shot up from nowhere and stung Jim hard. Huck managed to kill the snake. By then, Jim was feared to death. He kept screaming, "Cut the snake's head and roast its body. Give it to me right now." Huck thought Jim would die, but obeyed him all the same. Jim ate the roasted snake and then drank all the whiskey and he could lay his hands on. In a few days, Jim was back to normal, much to Huck's relief. Time passed. Huck began to get bored with life on island. He was fidgety and wanted news. So the two friends decided that Huck could go to a town on the other side of the river. Huck wore a dress and learned to walk like a girl. He called himself Sarah. In the town, Huck met a young woman full of gossip. Among other things, she said, "Oh, you must know how that boy Huckleberry got killed. It was the slave Jim who killed him and made off with his things." Huck was startled. "What makes you think so?" he asked the woman. "Oh, aren't you stupid? Jim ran off the same day that Huck was murdered. And you know what? I know where he is hiding. I noticed some smoke rising from the Jackson Island where no one lives. My husband and his friends will go out to check out the island," she said. Huck got twitchy about his fate. As he listened to her, the woman could not help but notice in order to distract her. He began to thread a needle, but his hands were shaking badly. Soon the woman began talking about how poor they were and that rats had the run of the place. She even had a saucepan handy to throw at the rats, but when she threw it, it was wide off the mark. So she said, "Sarah, why don't you try?" Huck hurled the saucepan at the next rat and passed and narrowly missed it. The woman then said, "Come out with it, boy. Tell me your real name and why you have run away." Then girls thread a needle. They hold the needle steady and move the thread towards it, not the other way round. And when they aim at rats, they stand on tiptoe, throw stiffly at the thing, lands far from where it was aimed. Huck knew he was cornered and said, "Well, my name is George Peters. My parents are dead and a farmer was making me work very hard and not giving me enough food to eat, so I ran away." The woman was all sympathy and offered to fix him a snack, but when she came back from the kitchen, she again shot a few questions at him. "Now tell me, when a cow is lying down, which end of her gets up first?" "Answer properly. Now no dithering." "A cow gets up behind first, ma'am." "What about a horse?" "Four legs first, ma'am." If 15 cows are browsing on a hillside, how many of them eat with their heads pointed in the same direction? All 15 of them. Well, you must have worked on a farm to know all this. I thought you were tricking me again. After this, Huck left in a hurry. He had to save Jim from being caught. Huck rode to the one end of the island and started a fire there to throw off anyone who might be out looking for Jim. Then he returned to the cave to find Jim snoring and shook him awake. Jim, get up. We are in trouble. We need to run. They are coming for you. Jim began packing everything without a word. They loaded their valuables on the raft that they had caught enough food and then left the part of the island. They sailed through the Illinois side of the river and hid the raft under hacked cottonwood branches. Huck told Jim about the woman. Jim said she was a smart one. She had come looking for us. She would have set a dog on us and caught us by now. Huck was only too glad that it had not happened, so both of them decided it was safer to travel down the river at night. Then Jim would build a wigwam on the raft so they could take shelter in the cold and rain and also keep their things dry. They could also light a fire and avoid being noticed because of the wigwam. Most nights, Huck would buy bacon and bread worth a few cents from some villages that they crossed on. Others, he would pick up a chicken that was not roasted too. Comfortably, Pop thought, Huck, pick up a chicken whenever you can. If you have no use for it, someone else will. In the morning, before the sunrise properly, Huck would go ashore and help himself to a watermelon, corn, or pumpkin. Pop called it burrowing, while to Window Douglas it was nothing but a soft name for stealing. Jim and Huck spent many nights arguing about this. Jim agreed that both were partly right and none was entirely wrong. As a result, they went on stealing without feeling bad about it. As they rowed along the river, one night they discovered a steamboat that had crashed on a rock with half of its structure underwater. Huck was on the spot in the lightning, and then there was no stopping him from boarding it. Come on, Jim, there must be some valuables to find, at least in the captain's cabin. They get paid $60 a month. Intentionally, Jim did not want to do it, but gradually got won over by Huck's enthusiasm. He warned, just don't talk more than necessary, and that too only in whispers. Jim and Huck groped around in the dark on the steamboat. Suddenly they saw light streaming out from one of the doors, and they heard, "Oh, please don't kill me, boys. I swear I will not tell anybody anything." "You are telling the truth for once in your life, my boy. You will indeed not live to tell the truth, and you would not have been so good as to make this offer had we not tied you up." Jim had had enough and turned back towards the raft. Huck was about to follow suit, but again he became very curious. He came closer to the room and found two men threatening a man lying on the floor, all tied up. The man holding the lantern was called Jake Packard. His friend Bill was pointing a gun at the man on the floor. Jim called Jim Turner. Bill wanted to shoot Turner right away, but Jake stopped him. He took Bill to another room and said, Let us take all the valuables from here and get away. Turner will die when the wreckage sinks in the next 2 hours maybe. That way we will not be guilty of this murder." Bill agreed to it. Huck was frightened when he heard this. He found Jim hiding nearby and whispering, "These men will murder a man and run away. We will stop them. We will set adrift the boat they plan to get away on. If they were stuck here, the sheriff will catch them. Let's go to the raft." Jim moaned. "Raft? What raft?" "It broke loose and floated away with the current while we were here." Both Jim and Huck were scared stiff. They were now stuck in the same wreck as the two murderers were. Decided to took for the boat on which Bill and Jake wanted to get away. Just as they were inch from the boat, Bill and Jake came out and sat in it with all their loot. And then Jake asked, "Did you check Turner for the money he had on him?" Bill said he hadn't. So they went back in. Huck and Jim crawled into the boat, cut the rope, and drifted away in the river. After the two were quite a few meters away from the wreckage, they began rowing and soon caught up with the raft. Jim got onto the raft and they moved all the loot from the boat to the raft. Then, since Huck was feeling really bad about abandoning the three men, he went to look for help. Huck managed to get a man to go and help the people on the wreckage boat, but by then it was too late, and it seemed as though no one had survived. So he returned to the raft where Jim was waiting for him. After a night's adventure, they two slept for a long time. Huck woke up to find Jim cooking breakfast. He was delighted to find that a major part of the previous night's loot were books. So Huck spent the rest of the day reading to Jim. He continued to travel by night on their raft. They thought they were only 3 nights away from the Ohio River. They could sell all the loot on their raft and then travel by steamboat to the free states wherever Jim could not be held as a slave. But the second night they were surrounded by dense fog. Huck jumped over to the boat they had with them and Jim and Huck were separated. Huck called out now and again, could hear someone responding, but could not catch up with Jim. He was lost in the dense fog. So he lay down, tired and hungry, soon fell asleep. When he woke up, it was almost down and his canoe was in the middle of a big river. In the distance he could see the raft. He rowed across and found Jim asleep, with his head on his knee. The raft was strewn with leaves and mud. When Jim woke up, he was startled to find Huck standing in front of him. "Is that you, Huck? Why can't I believe you are alive?" "Alive? What do you mean?" "I have been right here, Jim." "Stop joking, Huck. You were lost in a dense fog." "Fog? What fog?" "You have been dreaming, Jim." Jim was confused and Huck felt rather happy, but Jim figured what Huck had done and said, "All night I was calling for you and weeping because you had been lost in the dense fog. Finally I sat in the raft, not caring if I live or died, and here you are, and only thought in your mind is to make a fool of me." Jim was very hurt, so Huck apologized and promised never to play such pranks again. In the next few days, Jim got very excited as they were soon to go Cairo, where he would be a free man. But Huck became increasingly worried. He was the reason that Jim would be free, but he was not sure if that was right at all. Widow Douglas and Mrs. Weston had been nothing but kind to Huck, and here he was helping their slave make a getaway. When they saw the next town Jim thought it was Cairo, Huck offered to go and check if that was so. He actually wanted to get Jim caught, but when he sat in the boat, Jim said, "You are the best friend I have ever had, Huck." Huck felt guilty hearing this. As soon as he was paddled away a bit, he met two white men in a boat. They were looking for 5 runaway slaves. When they asked Huck who was in the raft, he said, "Just my pap and Mary Ann. They are very ill." He let on the boat his pap and had a smallpox. It was a dreaded disease. The men rowed away in a hurry, came back to the raft. Jim told to Huck came back to the raft and told Jim about the 2 men. He also told him that it was not Cairo as they had thought. The 2 friends were still lucky because out of the sympathy, the 2 men had given Huck about $20 each and told him to go to the next big town. "This is enough money to buy our passage on a steamboat to the Free States." Huck thought Huck by this time. Huck had decided not to betray Jim. However, things didn't turn out as they had thought, and the disaster was around the corner. At night, as they were traveling down the river, their raft was hit by a steamboat and was broken into pieces. Huck and Jim were separated again. Huck drifted along on a plank and crossed the river. Finally, he landed on the shore. As he walked along the bank, he strolled into a big mansion. Some rich aristocrats must be living here, he thought. Suddenly, a pack of dogs ran out of the mansion and surrounded Huck. They were sniffing and barking aloud. Just then he heard a loud, coarse voice. "Who goes there?" "It is I, sir. I am only a boy." "Really? And who is I? And what are you doing here this late at night?" "I fell off the steamboat. My name is George Jackson." "Have you heard of the shepherd's son?" "No, sir." "Well, that may be, or may not be. Stand still if you are telling the truth. You have nothing to fear. Now walk slowly towards the door, Tom, Bob, and get the guns." Huck put his head inside the door to find 3 men pointing gun at him and 3 women standing behind them. When they saw that he was just a boy, they left him in and called him to the parlor, checked him for weapons, and held his face up to the light to check if he was shepherd's son. He was introduced to the 3 men, Tom, Bob, and Buck, given dinner, and then sent off to bed. Since Huck had told tall tales about how he was an orphan, they took pity on him. "You can stay with us for as long as you want," said one of them. Huck liked the way the house was built, decorated, and kept. The family was called Grangerford. The 2 sisters were called Charlotte and Sophia. Another sister, Emmeline, had died when she was 15. They had 3 more sons who had been killed. This all largely owing to a long-standing feud with the shepherd's sons. The other rich aristocrats in the area, Huck stayed with the family for a long time. One day, Huck was out for a walk with Buck. Buck saw Harney shepherd's son in the woods and shot at him but could not injure him. The man started shooting at them, and Huck and Buck had to run all the way home. The following Sunday, they all went to church but kept their guns handy. There could be more attacks. Once they got back, Sophia called Huck to her room and said, "Will you be a good boy and run to the church for me?" When Huck agreed, she said, "I forgot to bring back the Bible. Could you please slip out on your own and get it and not tell anyone?" Huck did what he was told, but he knew she couldn't be so eager to get her Bible back. So he gave it a shake, and out fell a note saying 2:30. Since he could make no sense of it, he returned the Bible to Sophia. She read the note and looked very pleased. Huck asked, "What is that, Sophia?" She said, "Nothing, just a bookmark. You go and play now. You have been such a sweet boy." Huck knew something was up, but just as he was thinking about it, his slave Jack came to him and said that he would show him water moccasins. "This is strange," thought Huck. "Jack had already shown them to me." Silently led him to a clearing where Jim was asleep. Huck was taken by surprise, but Jim wasn't. He had been following Huck through the other slaves and was continuously informed about all the Huck was up to. He had been afraid that he would be caught if he came out of his hiding and put to slavery again. The other slaves had found the broken raft and Jim had put it right. Jim was all set to sail off again and had also bought provisions he would need on the way. Huck was glad to meet his friend again and returned to the Gangerford house. Next morning, Huck woke up to a strangely quiet room. Jack told him that Sophie had run away with Honey Shepherdson. The whole family had ridden out to get her back and kill the Shepherdsons. The woman had gone out to inform the relative to come and help. When Huck reached the battleground, the two families were exchanging fire. The old man Gangerford, Tom and Bill were dead, while Buck had his cousin were being. Huck did not chased and shot at. Huck climbed a tree and remaining there till it was late in the evening. Then he set off for the raft. On the way he saw Buck's body in the river. He pulled it out, shut his eyes, the boy, and cried. Huck did not go back to Gangerford House as he thought he was responsible for Sophia being able to run away. Instead, he went to find the raft, but it wasn't there. Afraid, he called out Jim. Luckily answered. Jim hugged him tight and said, "I'm so glad to see you alive. I thought you had died in all the firing." Huck and Jim again set off their raft and they traveled quietly for some days. One day, while Huck was looking for berries on the shore, he ran into two men running for their lives. He took pity on them and saved them, only to find that they were crooks. One was bald and old, and another about 30. They soon teamed up and began to tell tall tales. The younger one claimed to be the descendant of the Duke of Bridgewater. Not to be outdone, the old man claimed to be Dauphin, the long-lost Louis, the 17th King of France. At first, both Jim and Huck seemed to be taken in by this and waited on the two like they were truly what they claimed to be. By and by, Huck realized that the two were just liars. Out he never let on because he knew that the best way to get along with such people was let them have their own way. The crooks would stop at a village and towns and make money in their own cunning ways. Once the Duke and Dauphin decided to enact Romeo and Juliet at the next town. Duke was to be Romeo and Dauphin with the white whisker and bald patches. They swindled an audience and made a run for it on the third night of the show. One day they learned that the people of a nearby village had been waiting for Mr. Harvey Wilkes to be turned up with his deaf and mute brother William. Their brother Peter Wilkes was dead and left behind a large property for them. The Duke and Dauphin met the family as the long-lost brothers. They deceived Peter Wilkes' three nieces with their false emotion and got all the gold the man had left behind, but Huck did not like this and stole the gold from the fruits. He relieved to the eldest niece, Mary Jane, "These two men are not your real uncles. I have stolen the gold and hidden it in your uncle's coffin." After this, Jim and Huck decided to run away from the crooks. About this time, Mary Jane's real uncle arrived. Seeing them, the Duke and Dauphin were totally taken aback and ran off to the raft. "They know who we are. They will thrash us or may even kill us," said the old crook. They made it back to the raft before Jim and Huck could push off. Wherever they went, they swindled people with their cunningness. One day, the man made a plan secretly and sold off Jim as a slave in a village. Huck was sad and set out to look for Jim. When he searched the family that had bought Jim, he found that they were Tom Sawyer's uncle and aunt, Silas and Sally Phillips. The family took Huck to be Tom as they were expecting him, and Huck played along. When Tom arrived, Huck quickly told him about Jim and their adventures. Tom pretended to be Sid, his brother, and stayed with the Phillips. After searching for days, Tom and Huck found Jim imprisoned in a hut. They made a plan and tried to run away, but were shot and Tom was injured. Jim and Huck got a doctor, but they were caught in the process in chains. Jim was put again in chains. Just when Tom's Aunt Polly arrived, she looked at Huck and exclaimed, "Why, Huckleberry Finn, is that really you? You are alive." Everybody was taken completely by surprise, but there was more in store for them as Aunt Polly correctly identified Tom. Huck was still worried about Jim being kept as a slave. Tom then told him, "Don't worry, Huck. Jim had been free for the past 2 months as Miss Watson, who owned Jim, had passed away." Huck gave Jim the news that he was finally free, and Jim was overjoyed. "It wouldn't be legal if anybody tries to put you in chains again," Huck told him. But Huck had a new problem, which he shared with Jim. "Now that Pop will know that I am alive and beat me and tricked him, he will really be angry and beat me black and blue." Jim heaved a deep sigh and said, "No, Huck, don't you worry. Your Pop is dead. Remember that body we saw in the frame house that we looted? That was your Pop." Aunt Sally offered to adopt Huck, but Huck had enough of civilizing, so he refused the offer and decided to set out for the West.